Hi, everybody. This is Erica from In the Company of Cards. Welcome, welcome back. And look who's here for our
Oh,
Sunday conversation.
hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're thrilled to have you. We're thrilled to be together again
Mm.
and let the conversation begin.
Absolutely.
So,
Mm.
last time at the end of our conversation, we thought that we sort of spoke about the idea of talking about religion and faith in regard to all of this stuff that's going on. I think that I don't know that we had elected, well, I'm not Catholic, but I don't
Mm.
know that Pope Leo had been elected since we
I
last spoke.
don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting for a
Mm.
million reasons.
Mm.
One, he's an American, although he also has citizenship in Peru. So now there are some people saying, well, is he going to be allowed to keep his American citizenship? Because now, okay, he's an American citizen, he's a Peruvian citizen, and the Vatican is its own country.
World,
His
yes.
own, yeah. So he's a citizen of that. So people are wondering how's that going to work? And I think
Mm.
I can see people making issue of it if Leo doesn't adhere to whatever lane the right here decides that he should be in. But it's a very interesting situation we've got now. So we've got Leo, who apparently I call him the white passing black pope. I think it's fascinating because a lot of the sort of the lore has it uh, that the last pope, period, was going
Mm.
to be black.
Mm.
And so a lot of people before the election were like, oh, yeah, so we've got some time still. It's not going to be somebody black. Well, when they ever discovered that he had black roots, that's kind
Yeah.
of made everybody sit up straight. What, I mean, is this the last pope? What's that mean? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the
Mm.
fact that he's got two older brothers. One of them's chill, cool. The other one, I think it's the oldest one, I think, yeah, is a rabid Trumper.
Yes. Yes.
So he initially said, well, I don't want to cause my brother, the Pope, any difficulty. So I'm going to slow my roll and tune it down, turn it down, turn things down. But he has since turned things up. He's ratcheted
Mm.
things back up. So I kind of, part of me is not unhappy about this because it makes me know that Leo understands our pain. Those of us who have
He
relatives like this
really acutely and personally,
personally.
he understands that mindset.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Now, I noticed that, or I saw notice given that the Pope will be doing a virtual mass. So if you are thinking of tuning into the parade, the birthday parade on June 14th, I would suggest that maybe you not. And if
Mm.
you are going to be home, that you instead tune into the virtual mass, because part of what a mass is, aside from, communion, which is the distribution of the bread and the wine, part of what constitutes a mass is that whoever conducts it, in this case the Pope, will deliver a homily, which is a sermon. I am
Mm.
wildly curious
Oh, yes.
as to what he's going to say because, as we said before we came on air, that date is not by accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I also think he's going to face an interesting situation because, the Pope for Americans has always been sort of other. Even if you're Catholic, he was from a foreign country. He
Mm.
spoke with an accent.
Yeah.
He may speak English, but English was never his native language.
And
And,
often the fifth or sixth
and
language.
exactly. And I think it's going to be a very interesting dynamic to see how this administration tries to interact with this Pope, especially with Vance being a Catholic. Um,
Mm.
I think familiarity can breed contempt,
Hmm.
and I suspect that he will not be accorded the same respect
Mm.
we would normally automatically give a pope by virtue of his being American and having a Chicago accent.
Yeah.
So that will be very interesting.
Mm. The other side of that is too, people will hear the familiar accent. And so for many of them, they'll absorb what he's saying better and quicker, even if they choose to reject it,
Hopefully.
than someone, because Americans are notoriously resistant to accents,
Well,
you know, other
that's
than
it. You're exactly right. There will be no missing what he
the,
says. And what I'm really curious to see is what language will he speak in the homily?
yes, because he is accomplished linguistically and he may choose to speak in Spanish or Italian,
He may. He may.
but it will be interesting in itself.
Mhm.
Oh,
So that's interesting. And then, Lena, you and I have been batting back and forth articles about the subject of religion and the part that it plays in this landscape, this political
oh,
landscape. So one of the things that I've read is that millennials, younger millennials, so I'm going to say people 29 and under,
mm,
till they hit that, whatever that other next category is,
yes.
apparently are quite a bit more conservative
Mm,
than their older millennials or than any of the rest of us. That's
mm,
very interesting. And part of the way that that's manifested is this in this religious fervor.
mhm.
And part of that is this militarization of Jesus.
Yes.
Uh, what do you think about that? Are you aware of that over there or?
Yes. Well, we've always observed American Christianity from the sidelines until very recently. So I'll just back up and explain that a bit.
Mhm,
So, Australia in the 40s, 50s, 60s, everyone went to church
mhm.
on a Sunday, went through the motions.
Right.
But Australians are very cynical by nature and by urban culturalization. And so, although people did attend church, we could not believe, like, once the prosperity gospel preachers came on board, like the Bakers, remember Tammy
And
Faye and all
Tammy
of
Faye and Jim
that,
Baker.
and Jerry Falwell and all of this,
Yeah, yeah.
roaming around the stage with microphones and doing that. And we would laugh till our sides ached about the naivety, as we saw it, of Americans going, how can you take this seriously as someone, as a man of God? Like, so even the churchgoers could not cope with this. It was a bridge too far even then.
Mhm,
Um, and the way that a president or an elite sports athlete would thank God, in their acceptance speeches.
mhm. Well,
Really?
yes, and now Trump, who has not got a religious bone in his body,
No, not a
he seems to
fiber.
say. However, he has taken up the mantle, we'll call it,
Mm,
and
mm.
said that God saved him from, the fake ear thing.
Yes,
And
yeah. And that he's the chosen one.
he's the chosen one. He has taken on their lingo because he's become this deified symbol of what? I don't even know of what.
Yeah. And I think the thing with the whole Trump phenomenon rested on a perverted alliance between the grasping, self-serving businessman and the evangelical movement in
Yeah,
particular.
yeah.
And so over and over in the Trump case, starting with the Hollywood Access tapes and so many other incidents, and how they would maneuver to escape the taint of that with this man. So it was like
It's
he is a man and so forth. So we've got to
yeah,
forgive him. It's God's judgment.
yes,
And so they slip between he's just a man and deifying him themselves.
yes.
It's
Well,
very slippery space.
well, and then you throw in what they're doing in regard to Judaism. Now, that talk about cynical. To me, this is sort of the ultimate in cynicism. So here we have Jews who historically have been persecuted across centuries and across continents. Okay. One of the reasons, for example, that historically Jews are connected to finance is the fact that they were chased all over Europe. So if you're chased all over the place, you can't really put down roots, plant crops, have
Mhm, mhm,
animals, and so,
mhm.
so you need a way of making a living that's portable, and that's how that became a thing.
Well, it even has a more specific religious connection because I think it was in about the 1300s or something, the medieval era, that the Catholic Church, because there was no Protestant church then,
Right?
so the Catholic Church was trying to clean up its act, right? So prior to that, you had church estates and things being given to the illegitimate children of the Pope, and it was a very different papal world. And they were trying to clean that up. And part of it was evil money, because somewhere in the Bible, and I'm so not a biblical scholar, it's about that you shouldn't charge interest on money. And it's the
Usury,
same in the
considered usury.
Quran.
Yeah,
Yeah, the whole thing about usury. You could lend someone money or give someone money, but you couldn't benefit from that transaction. So it was made law in many Catholic countries that only Jews could handle money in that way. So what happened then was people resented the Jews because
right,
if you had to go and borrow filthy money, you had to do it from the filthy Jews.
right,
And if you were very poor and you had to sell your wedding ring to feed your children, oh, I had to give my wedding ring
right.
to a Jew. So it fed into this
And
demonization of Judaism. And then, like you say, the portability of working with that became survival.
right,
Absolute.
exactly. So it's completely, historically clear where all of that came from. But what you've got now, I mean, it really rankles, I have to say. So I'm thinking about the schools and the colleges. I went to Harvard. I am very proud of my college for doing the right thing. But you have a place like, for example, Columbia. Now, I have worked in my life, another life in this lifetime, another hat that I wore was helping kids get into elite U.S. universities, kids from around
Mhm.
the world.
Yeah.
And one of my jobs that I had for a couple of years was assistant director of admissions at Columbia University.
Mhm.
And of the Ivy League schools, that was considered by Jews even the
Mhm.
Jewish Ivy. It
Mhm.
was in the middle of New York. It was a very, I mean, that's just where you went if you wanted to be
Mhm.
at an Ivy and be comfortable. Okay. The administration, this current administration, could not care less about anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism. No.
It's very cynical and it's Machiavellian in some ways because you come across as being a champion of Jews,
Mhm.
but really what will end up happening is that who will one more time bear the brunt of the
Mhm.
blame for everything that's
Mhm.
happening? The Jews will.
Mhm.
The Jews will. With Trump, this Christo nationalist
Mhm.
bunch say, yeah, he's a sinner, but he is sent to us by God. He's kind of like, think of Judas. Judas
Mhm.
betrayed Jesus. Well, if Judas didn't betray Jesus, then there would have been no need for him to be assassinated, and then there would be no Christianity. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
Yes,
so,
and he was
so
also
Judas,
killed by a Roman, but
exactly. But he's a necessary part of the story in order to make
yeah.
the whole thing work. Now, this Christo nationalist bunch, remember, are waiting for Jesus to come again.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't come again unless we have first the Antichrist. A lot of them will say, on the one hand, he's that Trump is the chosen one, but a lot of them will also say, sotto voce, quiet as it's kept, he's the
Mm-hmm.
Antichrist, because you need the Antichrist to usher in this new Jerusalem where Jesus will come again. It's very warped and it's very twisted, you know. Here we say, well, I don't know, Black people say that Martin Luther King was the first to say it that 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, which is when people go to church,
Mm-hmm.
10 o'clock on a Sunday morning is the most segregated hour
Yes,
in America. And that is no lie. That
yeah,
is true.
yes.
So what that means is that you've got this white Christo nationalist church, which, among other things, condones racist behavior.
Mhm. Not only condones, these are pastors,
Yeah,
you know.
that's right. That's right.
And this is part of the problem of a lot of these parishes and a lot of religious education, because there's a great education divide going on here too.
Right.
There's a similar problem in the Pacific Islands in the sense that anyone can become a reverend.
Mm,
Unlike the Catholic Church, where you have to go to a seminary for years and years and years and learn your stuff. So, and like I said, it's similarly in the Pacific, anyone's brother-in-law can just say, I'm a reverend now, and you'll get some cousins to follow and stuff. So you have, and particularly in the South in the US, these people who are often uneducated, but it's not about how much formal education you have. It's about your heart and other things. So you've got a combination of lack of education, cherry picking from the Bible, and then ranting from the pulpit.
that's right. My mother had a term. This is a very, Black people will know this term. We would call them jackleg preachers. Yeah, jackleg preachers, where you know what they're there for. They're there to make money when people
Mm.
pass the plate.
Yep.
The money's going in their pocket. And they're there to just, it's a power trip. And what's so interesting is here we are in the 21st century. We've almost finished the first quarter of the 21st century, and we might as well be in the 1930s.
Yes. In so many ways.
So many.
Yes. Yeah. We appear to be going backwards. And by all measures, we are. This is the first generation of young adult children who are not going to do better than their parents financially.
That's right.
Exactly. So we had this incremental improvement after the Second World War. Now it's going backwards. But I don't think any of us would have dreamt that we'd be looking at Gilead, in terms of it's so scary that there's so little pushback to these extreme laws that are couched around the pro-life movement. And so I think we need a little digression for a moment here about those laws, um, in the sense that I remember when women couldn't get contraception
Oh,
unless they were
why?
married.
Yeah,
And I remember women having to have backyard
right.
abortions
With
in
the
other
with
states,
using what is it with coat hangers?
coat hangers, but also having to go to other states.
Yeah,
No, remember it. And there be this whispered conversations in houses. And so my mother and different ones would they would lend each other whatever they could, a few to get on a train from the deep north, as we call Queensland, to Sydney to have, and terrible gynecological repercussions
Right.
of this stuff. And to see it again is unbelievable. But I'll just back to our original point. If you scratch the surface, any of them will say it's because I'm pro-life. There is
Yeah,
nothing more sacred than a
yeah,
human life.
yeah,
They don't care about the starving 5-year-olds who aren't
yeah.
getting breakfast or lunch. They don't care.
But when they're in the womb, the womb, by the way, of a living, breathing human woman
Yes,
who,
well, exactly.
yeah,
And these same people, straight-faced and without a moment's contradiction, will back the death penalty.
yes, yes,
Now, it's just
hypocrisy.
mind-bending.
It's
The
hypocrisy.
hypocrisy, it rests on hypocrisy and lack of critical thought, you
Well,
know,
right. And
and lack of
critical,
compassion.
that's why the destruction of the university is so important to Trump and his ilk, because critical thought is not something that they want to be encouraged on any level. I sent you an article about
Yes.
coalescence that's taking place amongst young women, young white women. And
Mm.
they are the evangelicals and the Catholics, the young ones,
Yes, yes.
coalescing over the issue of abortion. And so to me, I mean, what I find most horrifying is that these are women being complicit in their own oppression and the oppression of every other woman. And I think it's this misguided thought that if you are under the wing of a male, you're
Mm.
somehow protected from all of the everything that's out there,
The
whatever.
hurly-burly of the
Early,
world.
exactly. When really you'd be better off in the hurly-burly of the world if you
Absolutely.
were under that umbrella, you know?
Yes. And it's by definition, with that dynamic, it's giving this inordinate power to men because we tend to think of them as grizzled, sort of older patriarchal men, but we're talking about 19-year-olds and 23-year-olds. They are not equipped to be the head of a household and make responsible decisions on behalf of. And it's also not twinned with anything in the real world, like making deadbeat dads pay their
Oh,
child support.
that's right.
Right. It's not followed up in
No,
any
no.
real
Oh,
way.
oh, no, Lena, you're incorrect. Don't you remember if you have, how many is it now? I think you have to have 9 children, and then you'll get a medal and $5,000.
Yeah,
I mean, what else do you want?
exactly. Life is complete. I know. And I can remember when I first went to Ireland because I'm Irish heritage, in the 70s when it was still the old Ireland before the Celtic Tiger rose up and before education improved and stuff. And there was still an award given every year for the woman who had the most children in Ireland. And it would never happen now. It was a short list. So you only got on the list if you had 17 kids or something, like 12 and 15 didn't count. You know.
This is akin to that, I think. Look at
Yeah.
the cheesehead who just left the administration, supposedly. He wants to, the reason he has all those children with all those different women is that he's worried about the white population decrease. So he's
I
doing,
think that's his public expression. I think he's as much of a narcissist, full-blown
is,
narcissist. So it's actually all about me and
right.
reproducing me in every form. But he knows that will play well. But I think that is also his underlying South African ideology coming through for sure.
Mhm.
But it's personally motivated,
I know.
by
Yeah,
generating the mini-me's.
yeah.
And again, classically, he doesn't live with any of the mothers of his children.
Right.
He doesn't live with any of his children.
Right.
He cannot navigate those relationships,
No.
but he can still turn them out.
Yep.
And there's another sort of sordid twist with the Elon Musk uh, profligacy is his trans daughter, Vivian
Right.
Wilson, who he describes as his dead son. I mean, what modern father would go there? Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, she makes the point. She was IVF, like I think they all are. And they'd done sex selection, which is supposed to be illegal, but of course, if you're rich, nothing's illegal. And she was supposed to be the boy, and the mother gave birth to the boy, and then she was obviously different and other. So she put very clearly, she said, I'm also a failed purchase in his eyes.
Oh,
He bought a son and he got Vivian.
got a pig in a
And
poke.
I really had to stop and think about what that would feel like to
That
a
would feel
young person to have that realization on top
yeah,
of his absence and everything else.
yeah. I don't know. It's beyond,
And this thing about white replacement, which underlies the whole MAGA movement,
right?
is if they really wanted to make it more appealing to have children, like most young people are saying, at best, I don't know whether I'll have kids. I don't know whether I can afford it and stuff,
Right.
because we've come to that point. But they're not making it any easier. Yes, they'll dangle a $5,000 check in abstract down the road, but they're not saying, if you have two children, you will have priority housing and affordable housing for 10 years. They're not saying we'll make sure the kids have access to this, that, or the other. No.
No, to good education, to good health care, to healthy
Yeah,
food.
exactly.
None of that. No.
We will suspend, healthcare layoffs for 10 years. I wouldn't encourage any woman to rush ahead and have multiple children on the grounds of inducements. But you know what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
They're making it impossible to have kids and then punishing women who are making decisions based on these horrible conditions.
yeah. I mean, it's, you wake up every morning. I do. I wake up every morning and I'm like, I mean, is all of this really happening? But I'll tell you something. It could not have become this way. It didn't become this way out of nothing. In other words, the seeds of this have always been there. We
Mm,
just told everybody, including ourselves, a very different story.
hmm
Do you know what I mean?
mm.
And I'm thinking, I don't know, does it all have to get blown up, exploded? Because there are things about just even the way it's constructed in the first place, this country, that are not great. Does everything need to maybe be,
Well, maybe it does,
maybe it does,
because the natural reaction when a country is in an extremis, whether it's through natural disasters or a takeover by a mannis, you know, creature, is to want to go back to normal.
right?
Now, normal in the USA was, as you were hinting, not a fabulous place in so many ways for so many
Yeah,
people. Because I'm an old lefty at heart, of course. So, in economic terms, the wealth disparity was already out of control. So back in the 60s and 70s, a CEO would earn approximately 7 or 8 times what a normal worker within that company would earn, which was a massive amount of money. It meant
still a
they
lot of
could
money.
get a
Yeah.
very nice house and,
Hmm.
have a very comfortable life compared with the worker. But it was within sight, at least, of that thing. Right? Now it's 360 times,
Right.
right? So, and Bernie's been very good at this all his political life just explaining the basics to America about wealth inequality, that 1% own this, 10% own this, and the 90% have to make do with this.
Yeah,
And then you have a political culture on top that wants this 90% or 50%, depending what you're talking about, to fight amongst themselves, and
right,
they've done that very effectively, and to demonize the other, in
right.
this case, Latinos or whatever. It's
Well,
so back to your point.
part of Bernie's problem always has been he's made this very cogent, logical economic case, but he also has held, I think, in contempt what he
Mm,
calls identity politics.
hmm. Sorry, I've got
He's
a hair
thinking
in my
is,
mouth.
oh, let's not think about race and ethnicity and all of that. That's not the point. The point is the economic piece of it. Well, he turns a lot of people off when he does that because
Oh, I totally understand.
he doesn't seem to get the second half of what you just said, which is that, part of how everybody keeps what they've got who are up here is by pitting people against each other. And
Yeah.
the alternative to pitting people against each other is not to ignore the fact of differences, but to acknowledge them and to
Hmm.
say, well, okay, so we have these differences, but what do we have in common? We have in common that we're
Yeah.
all being screwed.
Yes. 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 And so it's an existential crisis for the US
Then
at
you've
this
got people
point.
like Peter Thiel, for example, and
Mm,
Jarvis, whatever, Curtis Jarvis, or whatever that guy's name is,
yeah.
who
Yarvin,
essentially, yeah,
Curtis.
Yarvin, yeah, Curtis Yarvin, who believe that there should not be any voting, that we
Yeah.
should be run by a monarch, that a monarch is not going to be like an old-fashioned guy with a ermine coat and a, thing on
Mm,
his head, but a CEO.
yeah.
So, are people not aware that that's the end game?
Well, this is another um ploy is too soft a word. This is another extension of this thinking, is that if you make things bad enough, what happens is people will crave the strong man. So, in anthropological terms, it's called the big man complex and stuff. So, if things are really going well, people tend to be more inclusive. They tend to be more tolerant in the big picture, less threatened externally. They're more likely to at least hear conversations about other things. If you grind them down, they're always looking for scapegoats, but they're also looking for the savior, which circles back to,
Oh, yeah. Then okay, so this speaks to two things that I just saw recently. One, so poor Trump, his feelings are really hurt
Taka.
that he got called taco.
Oh, I
He's
love
so
it.
dumb. What he should have said was, that's hysterical, funny. Yeah, it's the way I do business. First I
Yeah.
do this and then I do this. And he
Mm,
should have just owned it and
yeah.
made a joke. But instead he got his feelings hurt. So there's that. So apparently he was tweeting, he doesn't sleep. So 6 o'clock this morning, he was tweeting or sending notes. It was an email blast to
Mm.
his followers. And the email said, it was a poll, and the poll consisted of one question, and you just answer yes or no. And the question was, would you like a check signed by Donald Trump for your portion of the Doge savings? So of course, everybody's going to say, yes, sign me up
Yeah,
for that
yeah,
check.
love it.
I mean, with COVID, we were delayed in getting relief because he had to sign the check with his big ugly handwriting
Yeah.
because he thinks people are as stupid as they actually are because people
Mm.
seem to think he's digging in his pocket to
Yeah.
give you this money. So that's just, I mean, stupid. But then I was going to say something else, and I forgot what it was. It was about, it was oh, this strongman
Mm,
idea, and I can't remember what it was, but it was about the strongman idea. Do you think that this is an aside? Do you think
mm.
that Vance will become the president?
I think there's every chance of Trump having a health event.
Right,
Therefore, there's quite, you'd have to put it at least at 50-50 that Vance would step into the role. But at that point, it becomes another question, which is would he make it through a Republican primary for leader?
right,
In which case, it's probably no.
right. And then and a lot
So
of
we
us
could
have said
well
no.
see
Yeah, yeah.
President Vance, but second step, no. But who would it be? What are the options then? How
Well, I mean, we
hideous.
certainly can't have that little man. What's his name? Uh, Johnson. Now he's the next in line.
Oh,
Can you imagine?
sorry?
Can you imagine
Oh,
Mike
no,
Johnson?
and I don't think they've got anyone that I can think of looking at their landscape who would capture the American imagination. So much as we might hate and resent and are troubled by Trump, I don't think they've got anyone with
No,
that perverse charisma
no.
that he had. So it almost doesn't matter if you know what I mean. I don't see they've got someone as captivating. It's certainly RFK is not going to be the next Kennedy to save them by swapping
No,
parties,
I don't think
whatever.
he's long for his job. I don't think.
No,
I think the
he's shockingly
pharmaceutical,
eloquent.
yeah, he's bad. I think the pharmaceutical industry will find a way to drum him out somehow.
Yeah, and they'd
Because
be working on it.
yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
are.
they'd be working on it. So that isn't my greatest fear in that sense. But if we can we double back to the religious thing? This fight he's having with Leonard Leo
Oh, yeah,
is very interesting because Leonard Leo is Federalist,
that's right.
the Federalist Society and stuff.
And they were the ones who gave Trump the names of the nominees that they felt should be put forward for Supreme Court and for the federal judiciary. And so
Ex-
why there's the fight is that 47's mad that these judges, who a lot of whom who he appointed,
Mm,
are voting against him in all of
mhm.
these court cases.
And this is the problem. Oh, it's very scary watching the American legal system in action. And at some points, there's wins for
Yep,
sanity. And the lower courts are doing quite a good job of saying no.
right.
But it's all at the mercy of this very distorted Supreme Court. And so it's a huge phalanx of democracy having an independent judiciary. And the Supreme Court cannot possibly hear each and every one of these cases. There's like something like 140 cases in the pipeline at any time
Well, did you hear?
about the Yeti.
Okay, so you know this, the bill, the big beautiful bill, right? That passed in the House and now it's before the Senate. Well, I don't know if you're aware, there's a little proviso in that bill that has nothing to do with money, but it's something that they've slipped in. And if this
Yeah,
bill passes, we could just hang it up right now.
exactly. And I think what you're referring to is, and the courts cannot hold the president in contempt or
Yes,
any or his lawyers in contempt. And it's just
yes.
it was slipped in
Just
literally
slipped
in the middle of the night.
slip in the right because they met at 1 o'clock in the morning one night and 10 o'clock at night the other night, and they slipped this in. And so Republicans have been in their districts and they've been asked about this. And they've said, this one guy said, well, I didn't see that in there, and it wasn't in my version
Mm.
when I voted for it. This is why, listen, you have people like Joni Ernst. Now, I talked about her yesterday in my video, talking about, well, we're all going to die. I think Joni Ernst has given up the ghost, is what I think.
Mm, mm,
And I think that she sold her soul. Speaking of religion, she sold her
mm,
soul to the devil as a woman who had been a victim of sexual assault and in the military and being a veteran,
mm,
being against Hegseth, and then having her arm twisted and being
mm.
threatened with being primaried to the point where she voted for Hegseth. She has to wake up in a cold sweat every night. So when
Yeah.
they asked her the other day about the bill and the fact that everybody's going to be thrown off of Medicaid, and she said, "Well, we're all going to die anyway." I think this was throwing herself on a funeral pyre. I think this is her saying, I can't throw myself off. So I'm going to say this thing that will cause you to say, okay, you're out. Because
Mm,
you see what I'm saying?
yeah. I don't know because the ones who are, yeah, I think you're right. The real sycophants who are just in it for proximity to power and who've made their way through the system and stuff are one animal. But the others who know better and then sell their souls are the ones who are the true and treacherous identities who will be earmarked in history because
Marco Rubio, for example.
Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham,
Yeah, poor thing.
Remember the night of January 6th, Lindsey Graham coming out, and he does like a drink. I think we're safe in saying that. And he was obviously had a few, and he said, "That's it. That's it. No more of this." And then look what's happened since. And so that inability to prioritize their country over a good income for not doing much is shocking.
Shocking. But you know what's equally shocking? Hate to say it, the Democrats.
Oh, don't start me. Maybe you should start me. No.
Go ahead, feel free. Take the floor.
Well, as anyone who watches my videos will know, I am a huge supporter of the breadth of talent that is in the Democrats coming through. Massive. It's a very talented
Beat that
field.
bench. Yes.
However, the leadership is a major problem. So we've got Chuck Schumer, who again sold his soul by signing off on that bill.
Yes, he did.
Everyone, it was such a rare moment for every Democrat to beg him not to. I understand if I was over a wine with Schumer, he would have an old school explanation for why it was important to be at the table. But symbolically, no, that was a fatal move.
Right.
We haven't heard from Kamala. She comes out once a month with a nice little speech, but not enough. Hakeem Jeffries get Pelosi appointment, middle of the road. You would not know watching Hakeem with any of his interviews that there was a crisis in the country.
Yeah.
You would not know.
And then, you had the oversight committee chair named by Pelosi. Well, he just upped and died, and
Mm.
she should have picked AOC for that role.
But would
AOC,
never do that.
no,
And that's the point. They won't let them out because if a party's healthy, it can handle a spectrum of people.
right,
So AOC, I'm loving where she's going with this, and she's just going from strength to strength.
right,
But I understand how she's not going to play well in the Bible Belt or the
right,
Seal Belt, big city girl. But if the Dems were smart and they really need to get cracking on this and not just rely on the midterms, they may not even happen, right? So
right.
can't just rely on the midterms. Use their diverse talent. So by that I mean you have Swellwell, who's
Yeah, he's great.
a good bet. You've got the Jamie Raskins and the Jared Moskowitz and stuff and Adam Schiff, who are really good behind the scenes. They're very good at what they do behind the closed doors in Congress or the Senate. They'd be brilliant. But they're not front of house people
Oh,
to gather the Americans en masse. You would have Katie Porter and the whiteboard talking to mums and dads over kitchen table
right,
issues, right? Connor Lamb, Pennsylvania,
right.
very well educated but can talk to steel workers. They've got it all covered, but they will not let them speak.
They
Oh, they
want
do,
to see power
obviously,
to
but I
them.
mean, to be leadership contenders.
Well, this is why they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. They're not going to live forever. And they are doing these younger people whose world this will be when we're gone no favors.
Exactly. David Hogg, they cut him off at the knees.
Yes. Well, that was it. That whole thing was very interesting. A lot of infighting between him and Kenyatta. Uh,
Mm.
they're both young, they're both up and comers. And I think David Hogg, I don't think he understands the nuance of things. Now, I
He
know,
doesn't. He doesn't.
and you
But
might,
sorry, go.
and in some ways, that's not a bad thing, right? You need people who are all in on one, in terms of what they think. But he doesn't understand that Democrats are not going to primary other Democrats. It's not going to happen.
I know, but that's why he should have been mentored, not cast aside.
That's right.
A. B. Give him a task. Go, okay, while you're getting your training wheels going in how the system works, talk about gun violence and talk about gun safety,
Oh, he got there. That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Give him that job. And he could go all over the country just talking about that in that process, that year and a half or whatever. He'd go, oh, I see. This is how it works over here.
Yes.
That would have been a better way to handle David instead of saying, oh, he just doesn't know his stuff.
I think
No,
get
you
rid of
harness that
it.
energy.
That's right. Well, they were so proud of themselves for putting him up as a vice chair. What's that
Yeah,
going to look like when they
exactly.
unseat him?
And then he'll probably end up leaving the Dems instead of being mentored into being a new Dem, he'll probably go independent and then be lost in the wilderness.
Yeah.
The biggest issue facing America, if there was one to, when we were talking about what is normal in America, what is not normal is for 11,000 Americans to be killed every year by other Americans.
Right.
Not Muslim terrorists, not Mexicans, gang members, by other major, usually Anglo-Americans. Now, the Dems have made zero progress on that issue.
Nope.
And yet, poll after
And
poll for
amended.
50 years have said 70% of Americans actually want some form of regulation. The Dems have never managed to harness that.
Nope.
They'll take our guns, is all the other side have to take. So I think that's a really good example of not a leadership with no vision.
Exactly. Well,
He's a young hothead now. Give him the job
it's
and
like
let's.
people who are hoarders and they'll say, you know what, let's just throw away the whole house because cleaning it is too much. Maybe we need to throw away the whole thing and start a new experiment.
Well, I think for that to work in a positive way, because it could work in a negative way, obviously, and that's the disintegration of America, which we're witnessing,
Which we're witnessing.
right? And it could just devolve virtually into a failed state, if not an authoritarian state, if not both. Okay, that's one scenario.
Yeah,
It could break down in another way, and that's why I hope viewers understand when I say I hope the tariffs go forward for now because MAGA and those who didn't vote, a third of eligible voters didn't vote. They could not distinguish between those two.
right.
Really?
Or they just didn't care.
You could not
They
see a
wanted to go.
difference. So you need MAGA 25, 30%. You need the non-voters and another 30% to have a radically different, healthier, more egalitarian America. And that involves Americans generally looking for other models of democracy.
That's right. That's right.
Get rid of the
You know,
ego and the
we are so
superiority
arrogant.
complex.
We are so arrogant. For example, you look at education systems around the world. Look at, now again, they're pretty homogeneous culture. That's what people will say. Oh, that could never work here. But Finland's education system,
Yeah.
where,
No public schools.
no, and
No
where
private schools, I'm
no
sorry.
private schools, and where educators are esteemed. It's a
Esteem.
high-paying profession as much as law or medicine.
Yes.
Right. And but we God forbid we should look to another country's example. It's that
Mm.
American exceptionalist arrogance that
Yeah.
prevents us, that puts blinders on us and prevents us from looking at the world and saying, it's kind of like medicine. People would look down their noses at, for example, Chinese medicine. Well, they're doing something right because they've lasted for centuries.
Yes.
They're not,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? They're not all dead from the plague. Somebody's doing something right. And
Yeah.
why would we not look to other countries? It's this American exceptionalism has bred arrogance, in my opinion.
It
It,
absolutely has.
it can be,
And that's obvious in even the mechanisms of voting.
yes,
Because it's fine if you're going to have state elections, okay, I can see you give the states a bit of leeway. But a national election, to my experience in all other countries that have national elections, they are standardized.
yeah.
You don't have this thing of, oh, I'm eligible here, but I'm not eligible here. I have to submit 3 weeks early for the
But you
postal
know
vote
what?
here,
Yeah, but
but 10 days.
but why do you think they do that? It's on purpose to
Of course, of
keep people
course.
from voting. And until everybody gets that, of course it would be so much better to standardize things. But
Absolutely. And students can't vote where they are in college. They've got to go back. This is rubbish stuff and it's entrenched. So that's why I brought it up in the context of back to normal, really. I
right,
don't think that is a good place to be. It
no.
has to shift.
The other thing is, and it was reminded me of when you were saying that these people need to feel the pain of these tariffs. I said to my partner this morning, I said, I keep talking on my channel about this revolution, and sometimes I'll say metaphorical revolution because I don't want anybody to think but
Mm-mm.
this revolution, you might be surprised as you get ready to storm Versailles at who's next to you. It might be the people that you least expect. Maybe
Hmm.
somebody who is a Trumper, a disgruntled Trumper on one side, and it
Hmm.
could be, I don't know, maybe the CEO of Walmart on your other side.
Isn't it ironic? Exactly. So those who are being disaffected by this regime, there's these weird alliances, and if you
Yes.
start to add them up, go for
It'd
it.
have to be a lot, though, more pain.
I'm afraid so. I think we agree on that. And for viewers, please understand that we're not wishing idle pain on people. It's because people have been stifled for so long, have been so uncritical for so long, have been asleep at the wheel for so long. It has to hurt to give
Wake
birth to
up.
a new, healthier, more radical view of identity. What is it to be American? Because for years it's been unquestioned. I can just put my flag out and wave it, and that's code for this. And yet you'd let the courts be dismantled on your watch.
Really?
You would let your daughter bleed out in a car park in Tennessee. You would let, the 4-year-old play with the gun and accidentally kill the 2-year-old. This is not a healthy society.
No. And we have a good framework. We have some good documents with good language,
Mhm. Yes.
but I mean, I'm not an Amy Comey Barrett. I'm not an originalist. These
Mm.
documents need to be living and breathing if they're
Yes, to be relevant,
to
they
be
have
relevant.
to adapt.
Exactly. I mean, nobody speaks Latin now for a reason. Latin
Yeah.
morphed into all of the other languages, which are living and breathing and do morph and things like that. But this originalist stance is nothing more than an excuse to keep things status quo
Yes.
and keep
And you could even argue that we've moved into a post-originalist world
yes,
because in the American context, you used to just be able to say that's against the Constitution, and people who'd never taken it on board would go, "Oh no,
oh,
well we
okay.
can't do that." Whereas now it's like, "Oh, whatever." Its power and its mystique have been eroded.
Did you hear Trump? He was asked in an interview, somebody said, well, I mean, didn't you take an oath to uphold the Constitution? That's the only oath he took, by the way.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And he
yeah.
said,
He said,
"Oh, I
"I
don't
don't,
know. I don't know.
I don't
I have
know."
lawyers who."
Yeah, I don't know. Lots of people talk to me. I know. So that was actually a juncture in American history, that moment of the President of the United States shrugging off his commitment to the
Yes, the
Constitution
Constitution.
was ho-hum. And people didn't rise up. See, this is the thing about the nature of revolutions, and we're talking metaphorically, hopefully, in that sense.
Probably not. I mean, probably actually, but
But in that sense of missed moments.
yes,
There's been so many missed
many
moments
mistakes.
for the GOP to stand up to its MAGA wing. And now MAGA has leached through the whole thing. Missed moments over and over and over till the crisis is inevitable.
Yeah,
And it just hinges now on this Supreme Court, whether Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh, God help us all that we thought, I mean, he might actually come
right.
through, um, is diabolical that it's got to this.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when you don't teach civics, I meant to say, or physics.
Physics is good too. That's right. That's exactly right.
Um,
That Harvard
and
has put up free courses.
I love that in constitutional
Yeah,
studies.
yeah, yeah, it's great.
Bless Harvard for that. Oh my God.
Yeah, but I think again, the metaphor I always use is we have this original sin that we are founded on money and we were founded on slavery,
Mm.
and we've never unpacked,
Dealt with it.
dealt with it,
Never.
looked at it. As Trump says, America will be woke no more. So he's
Mm.
trying to erase everything, and until we do that, we are like a foundation of a house that is on sand.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks cute from a distance.
Mm. Shiny, lots of
Oh, yeah,
lights.
the decor looks great, but don't let a wind come by. Don't let a storm
Yeah.
hit it because it'll collapse. And that's what's going on right now.
Yes, yes. And on the international stage, it was obviously assumed every other country would be shocked by the tariffs and then just crawl back
I'm
to
so
the
glad
mighty
that the
US.
world did
It
not
hasn't
do that.
happened like
No,
that.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, this is why he's taco because he throws this thing out and people are like, whatever. And
Mm.
that's well, okay, how about a little less? How about he's bargaining with himself. He's not even bargaining with, other countries. And he looks like what he is. What can I say?
And he doesn't look like a very edible taco either, like
Oh.
one that's been sitting around for 6 days.
He looks like a taco that McDonald's would make. So that 20 years later,
Yes,
would look
exactly.
just the
But
same.
isn't it funny? I know we're out of time. I mean, it's whizzed away, but why? And it's obviously going to stick. And after the name calling that he has done, from
Yes.
day one. And this is the first one that stuck.
Well, you know what? There were somebody who, the people who do read body language.
Mm.
And so, because at first he didn't hear the reporter.
Yes, he said, I kicked it. He said to her, I kicked it.
So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
he
Is that
thought it
what you
was going to
said?
be,
I kicked
yeah,
it.
yes, he thought it was going to be a compliment. And to
Yeah.
go from a compliment where cock-a-doodle-doo, I'm all that, to no, 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 taco. Because Trump always, they said, the body language people said that he went from shock to sadness. And I thought,
Mm.
what an interesting noun to use. And then, of
Yeah,
course, he devolved it to anger. But the
yeah.
sadness speaks to the fact that he is someone with an enormous ego made out of Swiss cheese.
Candy floss,
Yeah, candy floss. Yeah,
Yes. And he can't even tough it out. When that wounded child is actively crushed, he gets truly demented.
yes,
But this is, I think, one of the prongs that is going to bring him down, his long-term reaction to,
yes,
because people are talking in shorthand now. We talk finally, the resistance, Wall Street Journal of all places too. If it had turned up on a podcast first, it might not have caught on. It would have been stuck in cyberspace. Wall Street Journal, then podcasts. It's here. It's going to haunt him forever.
yes, exactly. Well, we're out of time, but you know what? I'm glad we're going to be together in July.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
think as the summer progresses here and you get colder over there, it'll be getting hotter and hotter, and I mean
Totally.
politically hotter and hotter.
Yes. Yes.
So
Totally.
it'll be really interesting to see what's next.
Absolutely. And a lot will happen between now and our next
That's
connection
right.
because we do them every 4 weeks or so, roughly. And that's a lifetime at the moment.
Absolutely. Oh, also, so what do you think about Anonymous? What do you think that they're going to be talking about?
Look, I don't like the mask, so but that's
No,
small
it's
vickies. I know
creepy.
it's
It's very
seriously creepy and disorienting.
creepy.
Look, may they come up with something that
Okay,
really
please.
moves that dial.
hmm Exactly. Exactly. Whatever it is, just
Yeah,
fun. Bring it on.
because it can't be traditional sleaze or corruption with money because that
We've
doesn't
seen
stay
that.
around with him.
Mm,
So it has to be something epic
right.
that translates into thing just to be able to shock people anymore. You
Well,
know, like
probably when you and I talk, it'll be probably the first week in July, and they
yeah, yeah, we'll
will have
know.
come out, and yeah, and we will talk about that. So wonderful to see you. Is it cold there?
Yeah, it's not freezing yet, but it is nippy.
Okay. All right. Well, stay warm
I will.
and love our conversations. And listen, you all, if you have questions for us, just put them in the feed under this video, and we'll talk about whether we can address some of them.
Good. I must tell my people that too.
Yeah, because that would be good. People do love the guy. I've had people say things like, "Oh, we wish this was live so that we could talk while you're talking and ask you questions in real time." And I don't know, that sounds great, but I think it would be a little cacophonous. So,
Yeah.
but the next best thing is if you have questions for us, topics that you'd like us to look at, please pass them on. I
It
know
would
people
be
have also
great.
said they wish that we would read cards, and I have said to people, you read cards on your channel, and I read cards on my channel.
Yeah.
So here, this is just two people from opposite sides of the world coming
Mm.
together to have conversation. And just as we model how you can use cards to divine, we're also here trying to model how you can have civil conversation about important things.
Yes, that is so important.
So
So
hopefully
thank you,
that's the
Erica,
takeaway.
very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. So great to see you. And I'll see you in July.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Everybody, I'll
Hi
see
to
you
everyone.
next week. And thanks for tuning in. Please do like, share, subscribe. And of course, Dr. Lena is Tarot Down Under. So go over there if you're not already subscribed to her, because she's got a great channel too.